Okay, thank you. Please state your full names for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Lukanyo Calata.
Do you swear that are you going to take an oath or affirmation?
I don't have a problem with taking the oath, ma'am.
Yes. Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you for being
Thank you,
duly
ma'am.
sworn. Mr. Vani, your witness.
As the Commission pleases. Mr. Calata, before we proceed, I'd just like to get you to confirm certain affidavits that you have made. Commissioners, I'm referring to affidavits that are in Bundle 1 of the Calata Group volume. I have, you have those files with you. Mr. Calata, let's start with the affidavit.
What we believe to be a violation of our rights, for the state had failed to prosecute our loved ones' killers. In our case, it's the Cradock Four. But yesterday, this commission heard from Utemi Similane, and she's one of the families that are part of this constitutional damages claim. I can think of the families of Caiphas Nyoka that are part of, that I'm representing today. The family of Richard and Irene Mutasi that I'm representing here today. The family of Imam Harun that I'm representing here today. And there are many others, ma'am. So I'm here today in that capacity as well.
Thank you, Mr. Calata. Can you just remind us of your current...
Mr. Vani, can you lower the... yes, so that you're better audible, yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me now?
That's much better.
Thank you. Mr. Calata, what is your current title and position?
Ma'am, I work as a journalist. My current position and title is that of the Director of News at ENCA, which is a 24-hour television channel that broadcasts from Johannesburg. And obviously we broadcast nationally, and we've got a bit of a footprint on the African continent as well.
And that perhaps explains why you weren't available yesterday.
Yes, ma'am. As you would know, yesterday was the State of the Nation address, and obviously in my capacity as the Director of News at ENCA, I had to lead that broadcast.
Mr. Calata, can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, and give us a short trajectory of your life up until the fateful day when your father was murdered?
Right. Commissioners, I was born in the small town of Cradock in the Eastern Cape, in the Karoo. It's a beautiful town. A bit neglected now, but still beautiful. My parents are Fort and Mkhonto Calata, as I'd mentioned. I've got two sisters. One of them is here, Dorothy, who is my older sister. And I've got a younger sister, Tumani. We grew up. What I understand is that my mother and father they got together when they were teenagers. My dad really loved her, and I think she loved him. They had a daughter when they were quite young, which is Dorothy. Fortunately, my father went on to go and study, to become a teacher. In 1980, he went back to Cradock, and then he married his childhood sweetheart. I was born a year later in 1981, and we lived at my great-grandparents' house up until 1983, when my parents moved to a municipal or a council house, and that was obviously their first home together. And we lived there for about 2 years as a family. You know, I mean, my father was a teacher. He was politically active. And I from what I gather, we had a happy household. We had a happy childhood. My sister tells a story of how music was very central to our home. My father was a musician, and he loved us. And his dream for us was that we would grow up and we would all become musicians, and we would tour the world, playing music. Up until the 27th of June in 1985, when all of that changed.
Can we turn to the story of the Cradock Four? Can you briefly describe who were these young men and why they were targeted by the state?
Well, ma'am, the Cradock Four, as they later became to be known, were four community leaders in Cradock, the eldest of whom was Matthew Goniwe, Sicelo Mhauli, Sparrow Mkhonto, and my father, Fort Calata, who was the youngest of them. Three of them were Ubud Matthew, my father, and Ubud Sparrow. They lived in Cradock, and they became They were community leaders in Cradock, having led two organizations, the Cradock Residents Association, which was established in 1983, as well as the Cradock Youth Association, which established in the same period. Now, my father was the treasurer general, or the treasurer of the Residents Association, and he was the president of the Youth Association. Matthew Goniwe was, I believe, the president, and Sparrow was one of the committee members as part of the executive. They basically mobilized the community of Cradock between 1983 and 1985, to the extent that at the beginning of January 1985, Cradock, which is this small little community, managed to govern itself outside of the structures of the apartheid government. In documents that I subsequently later found when I really started pursuing the issue of justice for my dad, we discovered that within the South African Defence Force at the time, Cradock was named as a liberated zone. Liberated in the sense that the people of my community were governing themselves outside of the structures of the apartheid government. They were governing themselves. The apartheid government's only responsibility in Cradock between January 1985 and June 1985 was basically they would be allowed into the community and to do social grant payments, and then once that process was done, the community would then escort those government officials out of the township, and then the township would go on to govern itself. And obviously that would have presented a massive challenge for the apartheid government, which I then believe led to them classifying my father, Fort Calata, and his comrades as terrorists, which then ultimately led them to call for their assassination. A military signal was then sent out on the 7th of June, 1985, that called for their permanent removal from society. And the instructions of that signal were carried out rather brutally on the 27th of June in 1985, when my father and his comrades were assassinated by agents of the apartheid government. They were then, the funeral happened on the 20th of July, and on the day of the funeral, the government declared a partial state of emergency, which was the first one to be declared in this country since 1960. And according to people that I had spoken to, all hell broke loose basically on that afternoon of my father's funeral.
Thank you. Can we now turn to the impact of the death of your father on you and your family? And can you give the Commission a sense of your life trajectory post your father's murder?
Commissioners, it's very difficult for me to be able to explain what it means to be raised in a house by a single mother, knowing that my father was not there, not because he didn't want us, not because he didn't love us, but because someone had decided that my father had to be killed because he posed a threat to their life or to their way of being. If you'd allow me, ma'am, to just make two examples. My father was a teacher, and he was the breadwinner in our home. I've got crooked teeth. If you look at my teeth, they're crooked. They are what they are. I believe that if my father was alive, and as a teacher, he would have ensured that during my teenage years that maybe I could have gone to a dentist, would have had braces, and that I could sit before you today, and when I smiled, it wouldn't be an issue for me. So that's one. As I talk to you today, I have a 13-year-old son now, and I struggle with fathering that boy, because I didn't have a role model in terms of what fatherhood is. So, rightly or wrongly, it's almost, I feel like I have to make it up as I go along. And I wonder and I worry about whether I'm doing right by him. And I wish I didn't have to. It's painful for me to sit here and to talk about it, because I shouldn't have to, ma'am. My father did nothing to nobody. He did nothing to nobody, except believe that the color of his skin did not make him less of a human being, and that my life as his child shouldn't mean less than that of any other white family in this country or any other white child. That's really all my father wanted. So I think to avoid me crumbling into a heap, I think I'm going to stop there about the impact of not having my dad.
Thank you, Mr. Calata. And we certainly appreciate the difficulty you face, and that this is a traumatic experience. Let's perhaps turn to your career in journalism. How did you get into journalism, and can you give us an indication of your career up to date?
I got into journalism because I think it's the only thing that I ever wanted to do, ma'am. And I think I was inspired by other journalists that would come to our house, come and do interviews with my mom, do interviews with my sister, Mrs. Goniwe, and the other families of the Cradock Four. And I knew, obviously, as a child, that there was something there about the story of my father, and that there were people that were interested in telling it, and I wanted to do the same. Not obviously just for my family, but I wanted to be able to tell the stories of other families, perhaps like mine, who were, perhaps not as fortunate to have a matter or a case that was as prominent as that of the Cradock Four. I obviously wanted to be able to tell the story of my town, of my family, and the contribution I think that, Cradock had made in the struggle against apartheid. I remember when I think we were in 95, former President Nelson Mandela had come to Cradock to come and lay a wreath at the graves of the Cradock Four, and we had an opportunity to meet with him. And he, as we were greeting, he asked, what I wanted to become when I grow up. So I said, no, I wanted to become a journalist. And he asked me, do I know what journalists do? I said, yes, of course, journalists tell people stories. He said, well, they do that, but journalists also protect democracy. I was 13 at the time. I had no idea what he meant. But I do now. And throughout my career, I've always kind of gravitated towards political reporting. I did general news as well. I did sports producing, I did sports reporting, but I was always a lot more comfortable, I suppose, doing politics, because we come from a family, from a political family, if I could put it like that. And that's how really I then kind of, rose through the ranks to finally holding the position that I do now.
You became part of a group called the SABC 8. Can you just explain briefly what that was about?
Well, the SABC 8, it was a group of journalists at the SABC in 2016, where there was, I'm not sure if I should call him a despot, but there was this guy that was leading us, the SABC at the time, who for some strange reason, wanted us as the journalists and us as the SABC to basically be able to censor the news that the SABC, that we report on. And in our various capacities, I don't think it was coordinated at all, at least not in the beginning. In our various capacities, the 8 of us, the guys that were in Joburg, they wrote letters, they would disagree vehemently with some decisions that were made in diary meetings. I was a parliamentary reporter, and I didn't know what was happening in Cape Town, in Joburg at the time. So on the 27th of June, which was the day that my father and his comrades disappeared, I think in honor of, or to mark that day, I then wrote a statement, like basically asking as to whether or not this is what my father had died for us to live in a country where we were being forced to censor the news at a public broadcaster. And that got me into lots of trouble. And ultimately it got the 8 of us fired. And then, in subsequent weeks and that followed, our colleagues in the media industry then started referring to us as the SABC 8.
Yes. Mr. Vani, there is no prohibition, is there, in him naming them so that it's not be states the 8, is there any prohibition in naming them?
No, I've got no problems naming them. Just see if I can. Suna Venter, may her soul rest in peace. Jacques Steenkamp, Futa Kricha, Krivani Pillay, Tandega Kobule, Busisiwe. I just forgot Busi's surname. Oh, she's going to kill me. I'll remember her surname, I promise I will. Busisiwe and Uvuyom Vogo. It was the 8 of us. I'll remember Busi's surname and then yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And did this lead you to write a book of the same name?
Yes. So what ultimately happened is that after we were fired, there was, we received tremendous support from colleagues both in the media industry and organizations, that supported, the right to free speech, and those kinds of organizations. So while we were protesting one day, I was approached by the publishers, Tafelberg, I think, yeah. And they offered me the opportunity to be able to write a book, which, I had never worked as a print journalist. I'd only ever worked as a broadcaster, either in radio and television. And so I accepted. I accepted, and that's how I got to be able to write the book. They wanted me to write a story about, the SABC 8, but that would have been a chapter. So when we were discussing it, I asked them if obviously because I wanted to tell the story around my dad and the Cradock Four and then, try to investigate the truth around what was happening, that they agreed. So I was then able to, have the one chapter around the SABC 8, but then I was also allowed to tell the story of my dad, his family. My father was raised by his grandfather, and his grandfather was Canon James Arthur Calata, who was former Secretary General of the African National Congress between 1936 and 1949. He had worked very hard to rebuild, ultimately, an organization that was really on its deathbed at the time. When he was elected into office in 1936, the year prior to that, the ANC had, led by Pixley Gaseme, the ANC didn't have a single meeting throughout the entire year of 1935. When my great-grandfather was elected into office, he rebuilt the African National Congress from the position of Secretary General. He served under 3 different presidents. By the time that he left office in 1949, the ANC was in such a strong position that it could launch the defiance campaigns of the 1950s. It could do whatever it had to do because of the work that my great-grandfather had done. So I was able to recall some of that in the book, as well as, just express my complete and utter dismay at that time at the ANC's failures to basically grant families like mine justice for having lost our loved ones in the pursuit of freedom, justice, equality, against the tyrannical system of apartheid, I suppose.
Thank you. Am I right in saying that the other member of the SABC 8, her full name is Busisiwe Ntuli?
Yes, Busisiwe Ntuli. Thank you, Howard.
Sure.
At least she won't kill you.
Yes, ma'am. I can rest easy.
Yes.
Mr. Calata, I think this is a good moment to turn to your struggle for justice. And I think writing the book, My Father Died for This, was part of that struggle.
Yes.
But can you give the Commission a sense of the steps you've taken over time to reach truth, to reach justice and closure?
Where should I start?
Well, for example, besides the book, I know you made a short film.
Yeah.
You've knocked on doors. You went to see certain high-ranking officials.
Yeah. Okay. Let me, if the commissioners will allow me, I'll start. At the end of 2009, beginning of 2010. I had the opportunity to make a documentary film, and I used that film basically to go to Cradock, where I went to basically go and ask for permission from my mother, Nomonde, Mrs. Unyameka Goniwe, Mrs. Nonkosi Mkhonto. Unfortunately, I couldn't travel much more than that because I had like a very small budget for that. But the idea was for me to be able to travel to the mothers and to ask for permission for me to try to pursue the matter of justice for the Cradock Four. And I did get to do that. The film was called Unfinished Business, and it aired on the SABC, I think sometime in April 2010. And that really was the impetus that got me started in pursuing this matter. Shortly after that film had aired, I was in touch with some people within the ANC who, you know, I won't mention them by name, but you know, when I look back now, it was all very fake, what they were doing. But anyway, I was in touch with them, hoping that they would assist me, you know, in pursuing this matter, but really nothing ever happened of that. And then I can recall an incident when I went to go and see the former, I think he was an acting NDPP, Sean Abrams, again, where I appealed to him for assistance with moving the Cradock Four matter forward. I had met up with other families. I can recall someone like Imtiaz Kaji, who was pursuing justice for his uncle, Ahmed Timol. And we, you know, being in contact, me and him, we were able to set up, you know, what we call the Apartheid Victims Family Group, because we were, you know, trying to get as many people involved, other families involved, and helping as much as we could. During the period of writing the book, we, on Freedom Day, 27th April 2017, we were invited to George Bizos. We spent, my wife and I, we spent the day with Advocate George Bizos, and we spoke to him a lot about the Cradock Four case and what we needed to do to be able to, to be able to move the Cradock Four case and other cases forward. Advocate Bezos's advice to me was that I must make a lot of noise. My sister, she'll tell you that I'm very good at making noise. And then I tried to do that as much as I could through the platform that I have, which was the media, which I understood I was a part of. I had a meeting with the former Deputy Minister of Justice, John Jeffrey, where I spoke to him about what why the state was not pursuing or prosecuting these cases. I remember in that one of those conversations that I had with him, the deputy minister or the former deputy minister said to me that, if it wasn't for the agreements that were made, they would have perhaps pursued the Cradock Four matter. I was very disturbed by that, because whatever agreements that had been made did not involve us as a family. We weren't party to any agreements. Nobody ever came to come and talk to us as a family about any agreement. So we didn't know what those agreements were. Shortly thereafter, I reached out to...
Can I just ask you to...
Did you ask about the nature of those agreements? What were those agreements that he told you about?
Ma'am, he didn't go into detail, but what I understood was that there were agreements made above, or the African National Congress had entered into some agreements, I don't know with whom, but ultimately that those agreements meant that my father's case was not prosecuted. I tried to push him as much as I could. It was in an interview setting. I wish that I'd brought a copy of my book, because then I would have been able to quote verbatim some of the things that he said. But what he told me ultimately, ma'am, was that their hands were tied. If I could summarize it like that, their hands were tied.
And where is this interview? Do you have a written copy, an electronic copy?
Ma'am, yes, the interview, I should have it electronically. I would have to find the hard drives in which we had done those interview, that we had recorded that interview on. But I had transcribed the interview as part of the book that I ultimately published in 2018. And I'm sorry I didn't think of bringing a copy of it, but I will gladly make copies available to this commission.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
Mr. Vani, if the book can be made available to the commission?
Yes, Madam Chair, we'll put up the book as an exhibit, and as soon as we get the transcript
Yes.
or the notes of that meeting, we'll also put that up as well. Mr. Calata, I do recall one quote, which I think is in one of your statements, or perhaps the book, where Mr. Jeffrey, when explaining why your case and the others were not being prosecuted, am I remembering correctly when he said, "This is the price we had to pay in order to move the country forward"?
Yes, that sounds about right. That sounds right. I'm sorry. I didn't anticipate the question around specifically the conversation with Mr. Jeffrey, but that sounds right.
And when he said that this is the price we had to pay, what was your reaction to that?
I remember I got very upset, and I asked him about my younger sister, as the price that she had to pay was for her to grow up without her father. Oh, sorry, if I may just put into context very briefly. When our father was killed, I was 3 years old. I was about to turn 4 later on that year. My sister was 9 years old. My mother was about 8 months pregnant. And my younger sister, so in the intervening period, my dad was killed on the 27th of June. my sister Dorothy was 9 at the time. On the 11th of July, she then turned 10. So by the time of the funeral on the 20th of July, she had turned 10.
We're speaking 1985.
1985, sir. Yes, so on the 20th of July, my sister was already 10 then. And then my mother gave birth to my younger sister on the 8th of August, which was a few weeks after the funeral. So when the former deputy minister said, this was the price we had to pay, I remember being very upset because I then asked him, but what about my younger sister? What is the price that she had to pay? Because she had to be born into a world where her father was killed, where she would never get to know her father, and then somebody then decided that she would also not have any justice for having her father taken away from her because politicians had decided that that was the price that they had to pay with someone else's life.
Thank you. Sorry, we intervened. You were explaining the different steps you took.
Oh, yes. Okay, so that was Jeffrey, that was about 2017. And then I reached out to the FHR in about 2018 when I started working with the Foundation for Human Rights. And once that happened, it was the first time where there was a level of support, where we could start thinking about challenging some of these issues in a court of law. I think shortly after I began working with the FHR, President Cyril Ramaphosa had taken over or replaced former President Jacob Zuma, and the president then appointed the recently retired NDPP Shamila Batoyi. And I remember I unfortunately couldn't attend that meeting, but I remember my mother represented us as a family in that meeting with Ms. Batoyi. And yes, and then from then on, with the support of the FHR, I think it was in 2021. Oh, in 2020, we then set up a foundation as a family. We then set up the Fort Calata Foundation as a vehicle that we could obviously use to, pursue the issue of justice and remembrance and memory for my father and his comrades. In 2021 was the first time that we were able to lodge an actual, legal challenge in court when we sought to compel the National Prosecuting Authority to make a prosecutorial decision, on the case of the Cradock Four. And then we started engaging with the NPA. We desperately sought, for the NPA to prosecute.
Mr. Calata, if I can just intervene a moment and just rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
Before we get up to the litigation of 2021, am I correct in saying that after yourself, your mother and foundation and legal representatives were then meeting with the NPA and the DPCI, a rather shocking discovery was made, which was that the docket was missing.
Don't swallow your words, Mr. Vani. If you could speak up, please.
Yes, apologies, Commissioner.
Yes.
I'll just repeat that in case it wasn't heard. If we can just rewind back a few years, I think back to around
It was 2019.
2019. And perhaps you can start with a conversation that the investigating officer, I believe it was Colonel Makua, had with your mother.
Yeah. Thank you. It was in 2019, Commissioners, when one morning I received a phone call from my mother, and she really, she was quite emotional. And she told me that she had just had a conversation with Colonel Makua from the Hawks, and he had said something about, a missing docket, and the fact that, as far as he believed, there was no interest to investigate the Cradock Four matter, and she wanted me to follow up on that. So I then duly called Colonel Makua. I told him who I was. I informed him that, I had just received a phone call from my mom. And Colonel Makua basically confirmed that he did have a conversation with my mother, and that he did inform her that he had been, he had been an investigating officer on the Cradock Four case, and that I think he had just retired, and that he knew, he knew that the docket had gone missing, the murder docket into the Cradock Four case had gone missing. Now, obviously, I didn't understand how that was possible, and then I reached out to the lawyers to inform them of my conversation with Colonel Makua. The lawyers then advised me that it was, perhaps good for me to be able to go to a police station and to go and open a case. As far as Colonel Makua was concerned, the docket had been stolen. So I then went to the police station in Cape Town, where I had hoped to open a case of a missing docket, and they would not allow me to, the police in the Caledon police station, they would not allow me to open a docket for a case for a missing docket. I'll paraphrase a little bit and try to make it short, but we ultimately had to get, the lawyers had to write letters to the office of the Minister of Police, I think was Becky Cale at the time, as well as to the office of the National Police Commissioner. And it was only once the lawyers had written those letters when we were then ultimately allowed to be able to open this case about this missing docket in the Cradock Four matter. And as far as I know, and as I sit here with you, Commissioners, I don't think that there was ever a single day's worth of investigation as to what happened to the original docket in the Cradock Four matter.
Thanks. We are going to return to that question a bit later because it is dealt with in your statement. But Commissioners, I can confirm that an investigation was opened. It was ultimately closed as unresolved, and that the docket had to be reconstructed with the assistance of the Foundation's private investigator, retired Brigadier Clifford Marion. And what is your reaction to the docket of one of the most significant cases in South Africa's history going missing?
Commissioners, my father's matter has basically dictated the man that I am today. The decisions that I've made, my career, decisions that I continue to make. The issue of responsibility and accountability are I take those things very seriously. To the point where today I lead a television news channel, and some of my colleagues that report to me are considerably older than me. But I have absolutely no problem in holding them accountable, because for me, the issue of accountability is consequence management, making sure that people do things right, the manner in the way things are supposed to be done. Those are all things that I hold very dear. Because in my head, I'm helping to build the society for which my father died for. So if people have got certain responsibilities, but they don't take those responsibilities seriously, it really rubs me up the wrong way. So when I heard that the docket in the Cradock Four matter had gone missing, I was really upset. And I like to make the example that I don't understand how something like that happens inside the offices of the National Prosecuting Authority, where nobody, not a single person, had ever been held accountable for a missing docket in a matter as serious as the murders of the Cradock Four. Prior to moving to Johannesburg, I used to work as the program editor for ETV News and Sport. I remember one day when I had misspelt the word calendar, and it went on TV. So we come from Cradock, and we speak Afrikaans really well. And calendar is spelled ER at the end. That's in Afrikaans. Calendar is spelled AR at the end. And I had mixed that up. And my editor at the time, she called me into her office, and I had to account for why I had misspelled calendar and how that went on TV. So if I could be held accountable for misspelling a word that went on television, how is it possible? How is it possible that a docket in a matter as serious as the murders of the Cradock Four could go missing and nobody would be held accountable? And it goes missing inside the offices of the National Prosecuting Authority. I don't understand. If my company takes seriously the misspelling of a word, why would the NPA not take seriously the fact that a docket goes missing? So I was very upset because, again, I felt as if we were being disrespected. We weren't being taken seriously, that my father's life and the lives of his comrades didn't matter, and that it didn't matter that they were killed in the manner in which they were killed, and whatever unfolded after their murders unfolded, and that we lived in a democracy because my father's blood was spilled for this country. And then those very same people that were in the trenches with my father, that called him comrade, that did all of those things, now couldn't even bother to make sure that there was justice for his life.
Do you recall the year when the docket was last seen, and in which office it was last sent to?
Yes, I do. Commissioners, the last time the Cradock Four docket was seen was in 2013. There was a request for the docket to be transferred to the office of, I think she was acting NDPP at the time, Unomgcobo Jiba. That is what we were informed, that the docket was last seen when it was being transferred to the office of the acting NDPP, Unomgcobo Jiba, in 2013.
Okay, Commissioners, that emerges from the affidavit, the Rule 53 affidavit filed by Advocate Chris McAdam in the litigation referred to by the witness that was launched in 2021. My team will find the references and will let you have those in due course. Mr. Calata, let's then carry on with the story. So the docket then had to be reconstructed from 2019 onwards, and then you and your legal team liaised with the NPA and the DPCI for a few years. What transpired next?
Well, we thought that the NPA was taking us seriously, and we were talking. We were, there was some progress because through the FHR, Cliffy Marion was helping, was investigating, was handing, new information that he was discovering to the NPA or to the Hawks, and we genuinely thought that, there was progress. But it didn't seem as if the NPA was interested in prosecuting, because there was always something as to a reason why. I remember once they called us to a 2-day meeting as the families in Gqeberha, and I got really upset with one of the prosecutors. Eventually, I asked him a question, and the question that I asked him was something along the lines of, or I made a statement that if he didn't believe that we deserved justice, then he must just tell us. Right? If he didn't believe that we deserve justice, he must just tell us, because we had now spent 2 days with the NPA. The purpose of that meeting was for them to apparently reveal whatever evidence that they had, but by lunchtime on the second day, they told us absolutely nothing. They told us that they had information that didn't necessarily translate to evidence. And I felt it, I was upset, man. I wanted them to move. And the prosecutor took offense to what I was saying, and I wasn't being disrespectful. I spoke to him in a manner that I felt was respectful to him and the work that had gone into it. But he took offense to me saying, look, if you don't believe that we are deserving of justice, just tell us. And then he took serious offense. And my sister, Dorothy, she's a clinical psychologist, and she had to intervene between me and this prosecutor, because she had to try and obviously calm him down, and make him, she's a head doctor, so she could explain what she did. But ultimately, we were able to find ourselves where I was able to explain that I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I I apologize if what I had said has come across as being disrespectful or undermining, the work that he had put into, the case. But we were just frustrated as this thing wasn't moving along.
Can you just help?
Sorry, sir.
What was used, the reconstructed docket, or was it the original docket that the prosecutor was using?
So for that meeting, sir, with the NPA, they were using the reconstructed docket because the original docket, we don't know where it went. Excuse me. So they had used the reconstructed docket to run us through what they had, the information that they had, and they kept on saying that yes, they've got information, but ultimately it wasn't evidence. The other thing that frustrated us was perhaps the unit, maybe the caliber of work that had gone into it, because the reconstructed docket, or the unit that was working on the reconstructed docket, was murder and robbery, and the Cradock Four case just happened to be one of 600-700 cases that the team was working on at the time. And so when they presented us with the information, it lacked the context of what it was, because they treated it simply as a murder, and we should never refer to murders of run of the mill, especially in a country like ours. But they just treated it as just an ordinary murder, and the murders of the Cradock Four were anything but ordinary. We know that the murders of my father and his comrades were ordered by the highest office in the land at the time. The amount of cover-up that went into it, the amount of planning that went into it, the smoke and mirrors that went into it, all of those things. And when we had that meeting with the NPA, none of that context was taken into consideration, and they literally just treated it because they were saying, we don't have a murder weapon. You've got two previous inquests.
They wanted a smoking gun.
Something like that, sir. Even though that there was a smoking gun in the judgment of the second inquest by Judge Neville Zitzman, which found that agents of the apartheid government were actually responsible for the murders of the Cradock Four. And then there was the TRC, where there were 6 police officers that came forward and confessed to the murders of the Cradock Four. They were denied amnesty, these police officers, but they were never prosecuted for what they had done. So the smoking gun was right there. If only the NPA, if only they had the guts to prosecute, we would not be sitting here today.
Mr. Calata, I can't recall now what's in the papers, but are the names of the people at that meeting mentioned in your affidavit? Or can you recall them?
The meeting in Khampepe?
The 2-day meeting.
I can recall some of them. I can surely do that from the families and from the NPA as well.
From the NPA is more especially what I'm concerned about.
Okay. From the NPA, certainly I recall Nomava Mvandaba, as well as Advocate Yanni Coltman. I'm not sure if the director for, I think he was there, the director for public prosecutions in the Eastern Cape, Advocate Barry Madolo. He was there. He could have very briefly, but I recall that he was there. Do you want me? And then, yeah, so it was those three, ma'am,
Okay.
from the NPA side.
The families.
Yes, and the families.
How many?
So from the Calata family, there were 3 of us. It was myself, my sister Dorothy, and our mother Nomonde. From the Goniwe family, I think there were 2, but I do recall Umbulelo Goniwe. He was there. From the Mhauli family, I know Umamu Sisnombuiselo Mhauli, she was there. I can't recall if Unsiga, her son, was there, but I know Umamu was there. And Ulonwabo Mkhonto and Ubongani Mkhonto was there from the Mkhonto family. Yeah, I think those were.
And so, please help me understand your evidence. Are you saying it was the SAPS, the murder and robbery unit, who didn't get the context of what they were investigating, or was it the NPA as well?
Ma'am, so SAPS would have been the ones that were investigating, and then, but we obviously didn't have meetings with them. So we only met with the prosecutors from the NPA. And based on, and I can only talk to you now, commissioners, based on the evidence that was presented to us by the NPA. And they were the ones that had, the NPA were the ones that had spoken to us about, you know, how they didn't have, basically, they didn't have a smoking gun. They didn't have a murder weapon. So it would be difficult to be able to prosecute in this matter. Yeah, so the issue around the lack of context from my side is based only on what we were informed of by the NPA.
And you say this meeting was approximately when?
It was in March 20. Can I just double?
Guesstimate.
It was in March 2023. I'm going to say 2023.
You can double check and come back to
Yes, I will certainly do so.
Thank you, Mr. Calata. Just one small correction. Are you sure it was murder and robbery and not the DPCI, the Directorate for Priority Crimes investigation?
I recall. Look, it could have been the DPCI, but I recall them having mentioned murder and robbery, that they were also part of murder and robbery. I remember that because we still discussed it as the families afterwards to say, but how could it be? Or maybe the investigators that they were using were taken from murder and robbery and then asked to investigate. But I do distinctly recall murder and robbery and us discussing it afterwards.
Okay. Although as far as we are aware, the Cradock Four case and the TRC cases more generally are with a unit within the DPCI. I think Colonel Makua was also a former DPCI officer.
Yes, I'm sure he was.
Yeah. Well, perhaps then you can explain to the Commission why then in 2021 you took this really big and significant step of applying to court to compel a decision out of the NPA.
Again, by 2021, so I had really started working on or pursuing like almost on a daily basis, pursuing justice for my dad and his comrades, like really from about end of 2009 onwards. Because by then it was also clear that, you know, I think my mother and the other widows, they, you know, they'd also, I think they were just tired, and they're tired of fighting and of waiting for something to happen. And yeah, so anyway, and obviously with the stuff that my mother was saying around how difficult it was and all of that, it really got me to the point where I thought it was important for me to try to move this matter forward. So, I mean, I think I was about 27, 28 at the time, and, you know, I decided that, okay, now I'm old enough to be able to pursue this matter, and I gave it everything that I could. By 2021, again, you know, I'd met with Sean Abrams, I'd met with all of these people, I'd met with the ANC and Jesse Duarte and Krish Naidu, and we had done all of these things, but there was still no movement. And then I think, you know, I asked the Foundation for Human Rights if we couldn't go to court, if we couldn't just sue them, or if there was nothing that we could do to try to move this matter forward. I was then advised that, well, I mean, we could, you know, we could lodge an application to compel. And I asked what would that entail. It was explained to me. I then said, cool, then that's what I'd like us to do. Which then ultimately led to us, I think on the 20th of July, 2021, I think that was the date, because again, I would remember the date because I thought it was important that we file the papers on the anniversary of the funeral. And I think, I remember I still pushed the lawyers quite hard to say that it was important that we file on the 20th. And we did file on the 20th because for me it was important that at that point that we now had to put the state or the government on notice that if this was the only route that I had to pursue to get justice for my dad and the others, then that is what we would have to do. And I wanted them to know that I wasn't afraid of them, and that this is what we're going to do, and that's what we did.
And then just briefly, can you explain what transpired thereafter? They were forced to disclose what they had, and then the legal teams had to get together. Can you recall what transpired then?
Yeah. Yes. So once we then, you know, filed our application, the NPA took a little bit of a softer stance, and then they basically indicated to us that they were prepared to, you know, for us to talk. Now, previously, we couldn't even get them to talk. We couldn't even get them to meet. So once they then came back and said, hey, look, maybe we don't have to go this court route, and to ensure that that they're compelled by a court to have to make a prosecutorial decision, maybe we could talk. I then said, okay, well, it opens a window for us. If this doesn't have to be adversarial, sure, we're prepared to go that route. And I think it was during that intervening period then when we were then talking to the NPA, where say, okay, cool, we'll make a decision on this day, and then the day would come, the deadline would pass, and then nothing happens. And then they'd come back again and say, oh, okay, cool. We're going to make a decision on this day, and then the deadline would come, there was no decision, and nothing happens. And obviously, those were setbacks each time, because my mother is getting older. All of the other mothers, I suppose, are also getting older. And in that intervening period, Mrs. Goniwe died. And that was hard, because Mrs. Goniwe was almost like a second mother to us. She and my mum, our father, Upud Matthew and my dad were very close. My sister Dorothy and Nobuzwe were born in the same year, and they were like a few weeks apart. Unyaniso, Upud Matthew's son, I am a few months older than him, I think about 8 months older than him. I don't have a brother. He doesn't have a brother. So we were each other's brothers, or we continue to be each other's brothers. So while we were busy talking to the NPA and they kept on moving the goalposts, Mrs. Goniwe died, and I mean that was very sad for us, because Dorothy and Nobuzwe were particularly close. And having to watch, obviously, my sister go through that, and me having to support Unyaniso as he was going through that, because now Unyaniso had basically lost his parents, and Nobuzwe, they'd lost their parents, both of them. So that was hard.
And who was leading the attempt to mediate, or who interceded at that time on the side of the NPA?
I would have to just double check with the lawyers, Commissioner, because sometimes I obviously wasn't in those meetings. I would be briefed that there was some kind of correspondence, or there was a meeting, between our representatives and the NPA. But I do know that obviously I think Mvandaba, that I've already mentioned, was part of those meetings. Yanni Coltman would have been part of those meetings, and I do believe the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Advocate Barry Matolo, was one of those people leading those meetings. And then there came a point where I think there was a bit of a struggle, and because the DPP in the Eastern Cape was simply not moving fast enough, and the matter was then transferred to the national office, where I do believe the former deputy NDPP, Advocate Rodney de Kock, was then also involved, and to try to move the matter forward.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Calata, talking of people passing away, not only were family members passing away, but potential suspects in the case. And perhaps just to remind you, since you launched the case in July 2021, the following persons of interest died. Eric Winter,
Yes.
former Cradock Security Branch Commander. He died on 18 August 2021. F.W. de Klerk, former State President, who was on the State Security Council, died on the 11th of November 2021. Johannes Velder van der Merwe, former SAP Commissioner, died on 27 August 2022. Adrian Vlok, former Minister of Police, who was also on the State Security Council, died on 8 January 2023. And Lucas Daniel, known as Neil Barnard, former Director of the National Intelligence Service, who was also on the State Security Council, died on 13 January 2025. And let me not forget Hermanus Baron du Plessis, former head of Security Branch Black Affairs in Port Elizabeth, died on 16 May 2023.
I remember.
So
that.
what effect did that have on the case?
Commissioners, if you would allow me just to speak about the last matter, or the last suspect who died, Hermanus du Plessis, because I went to the office that morning, and when I got to the office, by then I'd moved cities. I was living, by 2023, I had moved to Johannesburg, and I went to the office, got to the office, opened my emails, and there was an email, I think, from the legal team. They had received a notification from the NPA that Hermanus Baron du Plessis had died. Now, du Plessis was perhaps the last suspect in the Cradock Four killings that we could directly tie to the physical act of having killed my father and his comrades. And by then, I had again been very vocal about, because I remember when former President de Klerk died, and when Winter died, and when all of these others died, colleagues in the media would call me, and they would ask me questions around, hey, this person died, and obviously de Klerk, who was a former president, was quite prominent. And so I would have opportunities to be able to publicly state, and remind the NPA that their delays meant that these guys who were already of advanced age were dying, and each death was taking us further and further and further away from the truth, and it ultimately meant that we would not be able to have really the justice that we wanted, which was to prosecute. Because I do feel that that is justice. Yes, the truth is good when you don't have an opportunity to prosecute. Prosecutions for us would have meant that it's a form of natural justice. Someone is being held directly accountable for what it was that they did. And to be able to take someone's life is ultimately perhaps maybe the worst sin that you could ever have. Because the thing that makes us godly, or in God's image, is not the fact that we've got two legs or 2 arms or 2 eyes. The thing that makes us in God's image as human beings is the fact that we've got breath. That's the thing that makes us godly. We've got breath. So when you take someone's breath, you take away the thing that makes them godly. So when de Klerk and Winter and Taylor and Lotz and all of those guys that were involved in the murders of the Cradock Four decided that they would play God and they would decide whether or not my father lives, they were supposed to have been held accountable properly. Now, we didn't want them to be killed, or we didn't want them, to to face the death penalty, because I would like to believe that we're better than that. But they should have been held accountable for what they did. So when Baron du Plessis died, it meant that we could no longer hold anybody accountable for the physical act of stabbing my father and maiming his body and burning him and taking his life away. So when I got to the office and I saw that email, I had a panic attack at work because I didn't know what to do, because I felt that the NPA was letting us down because it was failing to move and prosecuting these people. They were coming up with all of these excuses. Meanwhile, the actual perpetrators were busy dying. And we don't have a say in this matter, because if the NPA doesn't prosecute, who else am I going to go to? If I don't like the public school where Kwesi is at, my son, I can take him to a private school. Then he can go get a private education. If I'm fortunate enough to have medical aid, so I don't have to go to a public school, a public hospital. If I fall sick, I can go to a private hospital and go get private medical health care. But it doesn't work like that with prosecutions.
Ms. Tembi Similani yesterday said she even considered private prosecution, although the costs would be prohibitive. Did it ever enter your mind?
So, yes, it did, up until I found out how much it would cost. You know, I asked a question and the lawyer said, well, I mean, we would just have to perhaps put up just 5 million rand just for security. I mean, 5 million rand, that could buy me 3 houses. But so realistically, the only option that we had for prosecutions was the National Prosecuting Authority. And so when they failed to prosecute, what else? What were we supposed to do? So on the day when we heard about Baron du Plessis, I had a panic attack at work, and I didn't know what was happening. I felt that I was going to die. I genuinely had no idea what was happening to me. Fortunately, at the time, my editor saw me, and he took me out of the newsroom, and they managed to calm me down, and I called the doctor because I was worried that I was having a heart attack or whatever the case was, and went to go see the doctor. My editor told me to go home. The doctor could see me that day. I went to her. I think it's called ECGs. They drew blood. They did all kinds of things. Fortunately, the test came back, and I was all clear. Like my heart was fine. I was physically I was good. I was well. But I remember the doctor saying to me that she asked me then what led to this thing. I explained to her that, look, I got to the office and I got this email, and then she said to me that what we needed to do was that we needed to heal the hole in my soul. I'll never forget it. I'm a lot stronger now because I remember when she said it to me at the time, I just burst out crying. I took her advice, and then I started going to a therapist and to receive counseling for that. But ultimately, the deaths of Baron du Plessis and de Klerk and everybody, what it meant that we we were denied the truth, and we were ultimately denied accountability for my father's life, because the people who not only who executed it, but who planned it, who were involved in the conspiracy and all of that, they died without ever being held accountable for taking my father away from me.
So you have...
Mr. Vani?
Yes,
I
sir.
think this would be an appropriate time to adjourn for tea.
As the Commission pleases.
Yes. I am apprised that the generator on which the air conditioner is running is emitting fumes. So instead of taking our normal 15-minute adjournment, we'll take the 30-minute adjournment so as to attend to the problem. So we'll adjourn now and reconvene at 11:30.
As the Commission pleases.
Thank you, Mr. Vani.
As the Commission pleases. Commissioners, before we proceed, my attorneys have pointed out to me where Mr. Calata refers to the discussion he had with the Deputy Justice Minister. And as mentioned...
Isn't one of your mics off?
Oh,
It was.
Yes.
let's test.
Yeah,
Testing.
we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll just rewind. Thanks for pointing that out, Commissioner. We can point the Commission to where Mr. Calata made reference to the discussion with the former Deputy Justice Minister Jeffrey, and that's in Mr. Calata's founding affidavit in the 2021 civil litigation. Commissioners, we have actually put up the papers in that matter, and it is sitting on the Commission's website under a tab that I believe is called Contextual Documents. We do have a preliminary index, so we only have one hard copy at the moment, but we can hand this up to the Chair with your leave. And the papers in that litigation of 2021, Calata and others versus NDPP and others, case number 35447 of 2021. It's referred to from paragraph 72 onwards in that affidavit, and it's at page 40 of that paginated bundle. Mr. Calata, before tea time, we had been discussing the fact that multiple suspects in the Cradock Four matter had been passing away. And of course, needless to say, it wasn't just those suspects. In earlier years, many other suspects have passed on. For example, all the killers on the ground, the members of the hit squad, had died in earlier years, so that by 2023, or certainly by the end of that year, as you mentioned, the prospects for a prosecution, at least of those directly involved, had faded. And that is why you were then essentially forced into a third inquest.
Yeah.
And that inquest is currently underway and will resume again on the 23rd of March. It'll be running in that week. So that's really where you are today. You have been forced into a third inquest in this matter.
Yeah. If I may, Commissioners, just on the issue of the third inquest. So, right from the beginning, when the NPA's stance kind of softened, so when they were prepared to engage after we had lodged the application to compel, even in those very early stages, the NPA was already talking about an inquest. And we simply just didn't understand, because by that stage there were still people alive that could be prosecuted. And we opposed an inquest quite vehemently, because we were saying, but why would you talk to us about an inquest? Why would you seemingly push us in the direction of an inquest when there are still people that are alive that we can still prosecute? And then, obviously, when Du Plessis died, the prospects of a prosecution kind of went away, and it was only then, when that window for an actual prosecution was then closed to us, that we ultimately were left with no option but to say, okay, cool, we can't get a prosecution anymore. The only thing that we could perhaps get out of it was a correction of the historic record in terms of who was involved, the names of people that were involved, what their roles were, and that ultimately that would reflect in history as to say this is what happened. And generally it was only when we had no other option but a third inquest, when we as the families then decided that, okay, at least maybe we'll get the truth out of the third inquest, that we then finally acquiesced with the NPA to say, okay, we can now go for an inquest.
And was the passing of Hermanus Baron du Plessis something of an inflection point or a turning point for you and the families, in the sense that you wanted some kind of reckoning for the fact that prosecutions or justice had now been closed off to you?
Yeah. Yes, Commissioners, indeed that was the case. Because, excuse me, it was only after Du Plessis died when I then basically engaged the FHR around what we can do, because again I was left with very little option. I was angry. I was like, but the state continues to fail us at every turn. They continue to fail us, and it was only after Du Plessis' death when I then started talking to the FHR around the issue on whether or not we could sue the state, because up until then, it was important that, or I felt at least that it was important that we pursued every avenue that we possibly could to be able to get someone in a court of law and have them charged with have them charged with the murder, and then perhaps have them convicted, for the murders of the Cradock Four. But once that window was closed to us, we had no other option then, and then I said, we needed to sue the state.
And what were you advised in terms of this proposed course of action to get you and the families some form of reckoning?
Well, so we were advised around constitutional damages, a case that ultimately that was an option for us, where we could seek to vindicate our rights, that there would be no, it wouldn't be a lawsuit in the classic, American lawsuit where we would sue the state and we would get money and, we would live happily there ever after. I don't think that is what we wanted in the first place. But that it was, we would be able to vindicate our right, and that we would be able to perhaps have a court confirm that indeed the government had violated our rights of human dignity by failing to serve us perhaps with one of the most basic tenets of any society, which was justice. And again, we then spoke about obviously how it wasn't just the families of the Cradock Four that found themselves in this instance. We spoke about the need for us to be able to invite other families who were in our exact same situation or maybe even worse off than us, and for us to have this united front that we're going and suing the state on. For the FHR was very kind in that they took those things seriously and they helped us to the point where last year we were then able to file this constitutional damages matter, when one of the prayers in that application was for the president to set up a commission of inquiry to investigate, why ultimately, what happened within the state, within the NPA Justice Department, or
It's us now.
Yes, sir. Which ultimately led to this commission.
And am I correct in saying that in relation to the prayer or the relief dealing with the setting up of a commission, that in fact you and the families and former TRC commissioners had already been writing and pressing the president for several years with a request for a commission?
Yes, commissioners, that is correct. I think one of the very first letters that we wrote, I stand under correction, but it could have been 2019, when we first, as the families, with the former TRC commissioners, when we, first wrote the first letter to the president, and the lawyers and would be able to confirm, but I don't think we even got an acknowledgement letter, from the president. But we had tried on several occasions to again just set up a meeting, or where we as the families could get into the same room with the president or his justice minister or whoever, for us to be able to raise this matter around the lack of justice for our loved ones. We tried several times before obviously we got to the point where we filed the application in court.
On that score, Mr. Calata, I believe there were around 5 or 6 communications, and that the president acknowledged receipt, and I think mentioned that it was being referred to the Minister of Justice, but then there was never a substantive response. Perhaps then we can fast forward to the filing of those papers in January of 2025. What was the reaction of the president after the filing of those papers?
I recall us immediately after we had filed the papers, that they, from the president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, who basically said that something along the lines of the president, excuse me, was sympathetic with us as the families, was hearing us, and that they would move, to try to assist. And I know not as familiar with the details again because the lawyers were handling that matter, but I do know that there were some discussions that were then entered into between us as the families and the president's team. And the president had indicated that he would not oppose our application, and he would, grant or, grant us the commission, but there were some conditions to, him finally agreeing. And, and I recall then there was the president, I think first they did oppose. I think it was just like a knee-jerk reaction where they did oppose, and then very, very shortly thereafter, there was a withdrawal of all of the oppositions to our application, and obviously that, that gave us hope, because it was a matter of, okay, we're finally being seen, we're finally being recognized. Thank you, for making what would otherwise be a very difficult process easier on us as the families. And then politicians and they were trying to bargain and all of those kinds of things, and we as the families would simply not, I suppose we wouldn't get into the ring and using this as a negotiation, because it isn't a negotiation for us. This is a very serious matter for us. I think I explained to the commission a little bit earlier about how I struggle with, self-esteem issues, I suppose, but also with raising my son. So I'm not here to come and politic. I'm not interested in those kinds of politics. And so we as the families, we pushed hard, in opposing whatever these tactics that the president was coming up with and what he wanted out of it. And I suppose because we wouldn't allow the president to walk over us, he then decided that, well, okay, he's going to reinstitute his opposition.
Perhaps I can assist you.
Yes.
So you are correct that notices to oppose were filed by the president and the other government respondents, and I think you are correct that that was taken in the normal course. And then approximately 2 weeks later, as you mentioned, there was a statement from the president's office in which he indicated that he wished to mediate this matter, and that he was withdrawing his opposition. And he also indicated in that statement that he would agree to the setting up of a commission. And then sometime later, once the legal teams got together, it was then heard that the president wished the commission to deal with the questions before the court.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Because the president wanted this commission to also be able to determine whether or not our rights were violated. And obviously, our rights were violated because as I'm sitting here with you, I still don't have justice for my father's life. That is a violation of my right. And I didn't, at least we as the families, we didn't understand why would that be. And the president also wanted this commission to determine whether there should be, some kind of financial compensation, which is obviously is part of the lawsuit or the application against the state. we, praying for an amount of money that won't come directly to us as the families. We won't, benefit from it in any way whatsoever, but that money would be used to do a couple of things, and some of those things would be for us to be able to memorialize our loved ones. For instance, I mentioned that as Fort's family, we have the Fort Calata Foundation. We have an annual memorial lecture in honor of my father, but that each year it's a complete and utter struggle to try to raise funds for us to be able to hold this memorial lecture. I think the last one the last lecture we did cost us in the region of about 300,000 rand. But just to raise that amount of money is quite difficult. So as part of our prayer, with some of the the funds from the state would be for us to be able to have money ring-fenced so that organizations like ours would be able to apply to that organization, get a little bit of money, and be able to go to Cradock, hold a memorial lecture in honor of my dad, so that we can honor him for his sacrifice, and obviously to make sure that that people don't forget. So, and then the president wanted that matter to also be decided or to be considered by this commission, and we felt that it was unfair for the president to want to do that, because ultimately the president is not necessarily bound to implement the recommendations of this commission. While we will sit and go through this process, and you as the commissioners will write your report, ultimately the president can say, oh, well, thank you for this report, but I reject it, and that's potentially the end of it. And that would ultimately then mean that we would then have to go to court again to try to get the president to compel him to act on the recommendations of this commission, and that could be another 5 years. So we felt that on those two matters, one, the violation of our rights, as well as the issue around the funding, for the memorialization projects, that we'd rather leave that up to the competency of the court. If the court says, well, if the court rules against us, then the court rules against us. But at least then, it would be a decision of the court and not based on the president just simply not accepting the recommendations of this commission.
So, Mr. Calata, that litigation that you refer to is ongoing, and in fact, answering papers have to be filed by the President and others next week. So that program will run through this year. Can I ask you, the fact that you had to go to court and file a substantial application to get this commission appointed, how does that sit with you and the family that you had to take that monumental effort?
Commissioners, I think I did mention earlier that I come from, excuse me, I come from a family where we trace, as a family, we trace our history with the African National Congress back to 1930. almost 100 years, 200, but we trace it back. My great-grandfather, James Calata, joined the ANC in 1930. Immediately when he joined, he was elected president of the ANC in the Cape. And he worked very hard for the African National Congress. In 1936, he was then elected to the position of Secretary General. And again, I mentioned that he served under 3 presidents, Pixley Gaseme, Z.R. Mahabane, between 1937 and 1939, and then A.B. Xuma in 1940. And he served diligently in that organization. It was under him for the first time as the Secretary General when by 1942 or 1943 they amended the constitution of the ANC where women could become fully fledged members of that organization. It was under my great-grandfather and the work that he did that allowed in 1944 the establishment of the ANC Youth League, where Anton Lembede, who became first president, the likes of Nelson Mandela was part of that first executive. And he continued to work for that movement. He set up a choir, it was called the Congress Choir, that would travel around South Africa. They would raise money for the ANC. In 1943, my great-grandfather was was denied the opportunity to become a bishop in the Anglican Church because of his political activities, and the white bishops at the time felt that he was, he would taint the church because of his political activities. My great-grandfather was, can I just mention that in 1953, he stepped down as a leader of the African National Congress in 1949, or he wouldn't put or stand for re-election in 1949. He was replaced by Walter Sisulu as the Secretary General of the ANC. He remained a member of the National Executive Committee. He was the chaplain for the ANC and the NEC. There was the Defiance Campaign in 1952. He was arrested. He was placed under house arrest. And there was a conference of the ANC in the Cape in 1953. By then, ZK replaced him as president of the ANC in the Cape. And because my great-grandfather couldn't travel and go to the conference of the ANC in 53, the conference came to Cradock just so that they would allow him to be part of the conference and to participate. It was at that conference that happened in Cradock in 1953 when for the very first time within the African National Congress there was a discussion around the Freedom Charter. It happened in my town, in Cradock, where I come from. It happened there. 2 years later, the Freedom Charter was signed and adopted by the ANC in Kliptown. In 1956, my great-grandfather was arrested as part of the treason trialists, and that was the year that when my father was born. Shortly after my father was born here in Sophiatown in Johannesburg, my grandmother took her son to go and meet her father. It was her father, James Calata, that called my father Fort, because he said, this boy is going to be the fort of this family. When Utato was released in 57 alongside O.R. Tambo, OR Tambo shortly thereafter then went into exile. But my great-grandfather went back to Cradock and he raised this little boy of his grandson. He raised my father as his own child. My father then becomes politically active. And my father is killed in this country. And he laid down his life. I mentioned that on the afternoon of my father's funeral, they declared a state of emergency. It was a partial state of emergency, but a state of emergency nonetheless. There's a family in Cradock, a family of Ponsi. On that Saturday, once the state of emergency was declared, they went into that family, the cops. They arrested the father, the mother, and the older brother. They left, I think, a 9-year-old girl to fend for her twin siblings who were about 6 years old. Those are our stories. I'm not fabricating anything that I've said to you here, commissioners. None of it is a fabrication. We've done everything that we could as families to help advance the struggle against apartheid, and particularly for the African National Congress, because that is where my family has got a very strong history. We understood to some degree that the apartheid government would not kill my father, prosecute themselves, and then convict themselves for the murders that they did. We understood that. We understood. But what we expected was in '94, when the African National Congress took over the governing party in this republic, that they would do the right thing by us, that they would prosecute the Cradock Four's killers. Judge Neville Zitzman delivered his judgment in the second inquest on the 28th of May. Madiba was sworn into office on the 10th of May, '94. One of the very first judgments of the democratic South Africa was handed down by Judge Neville Zitzman, where he found that the Cradock Four were killed by members of the apartheid government or security branch. So we expected that there would be justice. But nothing ever came. My father and his comrades were portrayed by the state, because no state should ever be involved in the murders of its own citizens. That should never ever be the case. The state cannot become the terrorist. Never. Not with the might and with the resources that a state has. It should never. But in the case of the Cradock Four and many other families, the state became the terrorist. So my father was portrayed by his own state, the apartheid state. And then the ANC then comes into power. And then the ANC then portrays them again. So two times. And it's not just my father and his comrades, but it's all of the families, some of whom that I'm sitting here representing directly on their mandate. And some families who I don't even know, that this commission doesn't even know. But indirectly, I am representing those families here today too. The ANC and the governments and the various administrations that it's led for 31 years now has failed us in ways that we can't even begin to articulate. It's the worst form of betrayal. We didn't expect better from the apartheid government. We didn't expect better. If someone is prepared to kill someone, if someone is prepared to commit crimes against a people's humanity, we can't expect much from those people. That's just what they are. They showed us the worst of what humanity actually is, and it's okay. But we expected a lot better. A lot better from the ANC. So they've betrayed us, commissioners. I'm a broadcaster. I talk a lot, but I'm at a loss for words to explain the degree to which the ANC and its governments have failed us. They've betrayed us, those people.
Mr. Calata, can I also ask you for your brief reaction to the fact that the government of South Africa and the President in particular announced shortly after the filing of your papers in January last year that he did not wish to fight with the families. He also wanted to see closure and he wished to mediate. And yet just weeks later, he seeks to reinstate his opposition and fight with the families, and even launches a stay application against your case.
Commissioners, I despise politicians. I really do. I think they're like the scum of the earth. Really, like, genuinely. I've got no issues against political activists because my father was a political activist. But politicians, they say one thing and they do a complete other. Because for them it's about form, it's about playing up to the public, it's about time in office, close to resources, and all of those things. We've heard in this commission here where former President Jacob Zuma as well, where he's mentioned to you directly, commissioners, said that, oh no, they understand the plight of the victims' families and all of those kinds of things. But yet, he fights tooth and nail to stop the proceedings of this commission. President Cyril Ramaphosa publicly says, oh no, we understand the plight of the families and we don't want to be seen because politically it's inconvenient for them to be seen to be fighting with us. So they say that in public. But behind the scenes and behind closed doors, they do almost everything possible to prevent us from, like, securing justice. And they do that all the time. Politicians will laugh. They will laugh in your face and they will pretend. And I used to work as a politics journalist. I was once the politics editor of another television news channel. They laugh in your face and they'll pretend that they're your friend. Meanwhile, the things that they do are utterly despicable. The fact that we are sitting here, we have this commission, it's disgraceful. It is disgraceful. And the ANC is responsible for that. And I'm hoping that this commission will use the opportunity and the powers that this commission have to subpoena former President Thabo Mbeki, he must come here and he must come and answer for his failings. Former President Jacob Zuma, he must come here. He must come and answer for his failings. They must come here. And you, as the commissioners, must ask them questions. Because the TRC handed over its reports. It handed those reports over to former President Thabo Mbeki. Not to anyone else. It handed it over to him. Him, as the president of this republic. What did he do about it? What did his organization do about it? What is his government do about it? If nothing was happening with regards to these cases, why did he not, as the leader, as the president of the republic, call his ministers of justice, his national directors of public prosecutions, his police commissioners? Why did he not call them into a room and say, gentlemen, or ladies, I need this to be done pronto? He didn't do so. That's why we're sitting here all of these many years later asking these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Calata. Commissioners, we're about to turn to the meaty topic of the interference itself. But Commissioners, I'm concerned about the conditions in this auditorium. The fumes have not gone away. It's still thick in the air. And I'm wondering whether we're endangering ourselves by persisting with the hearing at this time. And I haven't consulted with anybody else, but it doesn't seem to me to be optimal conditions in which to hold this hearing at the present time. And I'm suggesting, Commissioners, that we adjourn until Monday, and that perhaps between now and Monday, technicians can come in and make sure that this auditorium is free of fumes, because I do think it's not becoming a health hazard.
Yes. Mr. Nell?
Mr. Commission, we feel exactly the same in terms of the conditions in this venue, and we support Mr. Barney and thank him for bringing it.
Just repeat that on record, please, Mr. Nell.
I hope I can do that. May I just say that we support the application of Mr. Barney, and we thank him for bringing this application, because we also feel that it's difficult to sit in this venue under these conditions, and we would certainly prefer to be able to listen and follow the proceedings without being worried about the conditions in this venue. So
thank you.
We support that.
Ms. Ranto?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you so much. It's actually the afternoon. We share the same sentiments. It's really unbearable.
Yes.
Indeed so, Chair.
Am I missing anyone
There
before
is
I come
appearance
to
for
the
justice
evidence
today, Chair.
leaders?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Yes, on behalf of the Department of Justice, we also agree with
Yes.
the proposition.
Yes. Mr. Semenya?
No objection on our part.
Yes. I think these are rather difficult circumstances under which to work, Mr. Vani. The Commission agrees with you that it would be best to postpone these proceedings until Monday, when the situation will be different. In the circumstances, these proceedings are adjourned until Monday at 9 o'clock. Mr. Calata, you are warned to be here at 9 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am.
As the Commission pleases.